The Trump economy and 2020, a new op-ed in the Wall Street Journal titled this: Joe Biden's last ride, pointing to the strength of the Trump economy ahead of the 2020 election, saying, this is Dan Henninger who wrote this, "We'll leave it to Donald Trump to defend his private jobs economy." But the dismissal of this long hoped for reality of expanding opportunity across all income classes and races as a, quote, sugar high or unequal is cynicism on a grand scale. One almost wonders, if Karl Marx himself were here today, might he look around at what has been happening in the U.S. labor market the past 2 years and think, this isn't so bad after all? Joining us now, Washington Examiner commentary writer and editor Siraj Hashmi. Siraj, good to see you.
Good morning.
Again, it's going to be very difficult for a Joe Biden or any of these Democratic contenders to argue that the economy is lousy.
Right. Joe Biden actually has a lot of catching up to do just within his own party. He argues he's the most progressive candidate. And if you look at his economic policies compared to, say, Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, he looks like a moderate Republican. I mean, there are just certain things that he's just not further to the left on that actually hurts him more. But with Republicans and people who are conservative on fiscal policy, he's obviously very problematic when it comes to the economy. So he hits things on, like Donald Trump on, say, the Charlottesville incident and his response to it and handling of it, as opposed to, say, running on something like the economy, which he was pretty much in lockstep with President Obama over 8 years.
I found it, James, when Joe Biden was speaking to the union, it was the firefighters union, he was talking about, oh, you didn't get a tax cut, and talking about the lack of wage growth. And I thought to myself, well, that's on the union leadership. If they're not seeing wage growth and decent benefits, that's why you join a union, isn't it?
Yeah, Biden, I think, confused, like a lot of people in the press, unaware that the 2017 tax cut reduced rates across the board at all income levels. But this issue of the running on essentially saying, let's bring back the good old Obama-Biden era, Siraj. I understand that among Democrats, Biden is polling very well right now. But as we think about his ability to pull voters away from Donald Trump in the industrial Midwest, do you think these are voters who were happy with the economy at that time and they were simply voting against Hillary Clinton? Or do we have some reason to think that Mr. Biden's going to have to do more than promise a return to that era?
Well, it's tough to say, because when Obama and Biden were running in 2008, you know, the housing bubble just burst. So it was actually very prudent for Democrats to run on the economy. They don't really have a case right now because the economy has gotten so strong. I mean, it's grown at 3% as opposed to 2% under 8 years of Obama, under the Obama administration. It's 3% under 2 years of Trump. So if you're looking at how Biden is trying to cater to a lot of Midwestern voters, maybe he's looking at things like expanding Obamacare, which is something that he's kind of, it hasn't really been very big on. And, you know, Democrats mostly want to push for Medicare for all, and Biden just isn't on that train.
And on that note, I just quickly point out the Trump administration is urging the courts to strike down the entire Affordable Care Act. There's a story about that today. So, again, maybe that gives the Democrats something to run on. I want to turn to fossil fuel money. Former Texas Congressman, 2020 hopeful Beto O'Rourke pledging not to accept campaign contributions of more than $200 from fossil fuel executives, already returning some donations. O'Rourke recently called for more than $5 trillion to curb in spending to curb global warming. Siraj, we're going to spare you not play that clip, but what do you make of that?
Well, he could still accept $199.99 from oil executives if he really wants to. I mean, this is, you know, Beto O'Rourke, he was flavor of the month right after he ran, but now he seems to be superseded by a lot of other Democrats like Pete Buttigieg, who's in many ways is seen as like the shinier Beto O'Rourke figure. So it's interesting that O'Rourke is trying to cater to a lot of climate change advocates, specifically the Sunrise Movement, who, by the way, were the group that confronted Dianne Feinstein about the Green New Deal, and she shut them down completely. So, yes, this is basically a symbolic gesture to say that he's on board with trying to pass something as expansive as the Green New Deal and as unrealistic as the Green New Deal. But really, it's just a play to get in the headlines.
Well, Steve, I said that, well, Eric Swalwell will corner the Kendall vote. people who want the president of the United States or their nominee to look like a Ken doll. And then you have Pete Buttigieg, who is a lot more authentic with his husband and his 2 awesome dogs. And then Beto O'Rourke doesn't look like a Kennedy enough to really attract those older voters. So he's left with trying to one-up AOC on his Green New Deal. And basically, he's not only talking down the economy, he's talking about a thriving part of our economy in terms of the jobs created in oil production, in natural gas production, and across the board in the energy sector.
Well, this gets the whole thing on this whole infrastructure thing, which we'll discuss later. Where are they going to get the construction workers since there's a labor shortage in this economy? And the only thing they're going to be able to fall back on is say, we're going to provide better medical care for you, and the jobs you have now are lousy. We'll give you better jobs in the future. It's kind of a dead thing. And what the interesting thing is going to be next month in June when they have the first debate. And each one's going to try to sound more radical than the other. And that's going to help actually Howard Schultz. He's going to look like an adult as all of these people go crazy to the left. People are going to say, these are clowns. Who needs them?
Right. It's going to be, I work on an oil pipeline, and wait, I like my job. Why are you trying to put me out of work? I think that might be the reaction.
Why is your extreme party trying to block pipelines to make it impossible to get my job and also get this gas to be able to ship overseas so we have more influence around the world? Hello.
We're going to talk about that, about the rising liquefied natural gas exports to Europe, of all places. Again, exporting inexpensive fuel that will reduce your emissions. That doesn't fit with
energy
the narrative.
For the economy.
Right. Doesn't fit the narrative. Siraj, good to see you. Siraj Hashmi, nice to see you always.